His stepmom dumped him on the street after his mother died. 90 Hells Angels showed up to build him a home. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and stale air. A small lamp in the corner cast a warm, yellow glow over everything. Outside the window, the last light of evening had faded. The sky was dark and heavy, the kind of dark that felt like it was pressing down on the world. 5-year-old Noah Carter sat on the edge of his mother's hospital bed. His small legs dangled over the side, not quite reaching the floor. He was wearing his favorite blue shirt, the one with the little rocket ship on the pocket. Sarah Carter lay against a stack of white pillows. Her face was pale. Her breathing was slow and careful, like each breath cost her something. But her eyes were soft, warm, completely focused on her little boy. She reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind his ear. "You doing okay, sweet pea?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, a little rough around the edges, but still gentle. Still hers. Noah nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. Sarah smiled. "That's a very honest answer." He looked down at the white blanket covering her legs. His fingers picked at a loose thread. "Are you gonna come home soon?" Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Sarah was quiet for a moment. She looked at him the way only a mother can, like he was the most important thing she had ever seen. "I want you to have something," she said softly. She reached toward the small table beside the bed. Her movements were slow, careful. Vanessa, standing near the doorway with her arms crossed, stepped forward just enough to hand the item over without being asked. It was a stuffed bear, brown and soft, with a little red bow tied around its neck. One of its button eyes was just slightly crooked, which somehow made it look more friendly than perfect. "His name is Benny," Sarah said, placing the bear gently into Noah's arms. Noah held it against his chest. "He's soft." "He is." Sarah ran her thumb over Noah's cheek. "And he's very brave. Just like you." Noah looked up at her. His brown eyes were wide and glassy. He was only 5. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but some part of him knew. Children always know more than we think. "I don't want Benny," he said quietly. "I want you to come home." Sarah pulled him close. She held him carefully, her arms wrapping around his small frame. She pressed her lips to the top of his head and stayed there for a long moment. "I love you so much," she whispered. "You remember that, okay? No matter what. You remember that." Noah squeezed Benny tight. "Okay, Mama." Vanessa shifted her weight in the doorway. She looked at the floor, then at her phone, then at the floor again. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were dry. She wasn't a cruel person, not exactly. But she was young and scared and completely unprepared for any of this. She had married into this. That was how she thought of it. She had married David Carter, believing life would look a certain way. Then David was gone too. And now Sarah was fading. And somehow she was the one left standing in a hospital doorway, staring at a little boy who needed everything she didn't know how to give. Sarah passed away just after 9 o'clock that night. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that fills up a car like water fills a glass. Vanessa kept both hands on the wheel and her eyes straight ahead. Street lights slid across the windshield one after another. In the passenger seat, Noah had fallen asleep within 10 minutes. His cheek rested against the cool window. Benny the bear was tucked firmly under his arm. Vanessa glanced over at him once. Just once. Then she looked back at the road. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't wanted this. And somewhere in the silence of that car, rolling through the dark and empty streets, she was already resenting every bit of it. The morning light came in thin and pale through the bedroom curtains. Noah opened his eyes slowly. For one small, quiet second, everything felt normal. The pillow was soft. Benny was beside him. The house made its usual creaking sounds. Then he remembered. "Mama?" He sat up fast. His hair was messy from sleep. He looked around the room like she might be standing in the corner, like maybe last night had been a dream. "Mama!" He slid off the bed and ran down the hallway, his socked feet slipping a little on the hardwood floor. He checked the kitchen first, then the living room, then the bathroom. Vanessa appeared in the hallway, still in her bathrobe, holding a mug of coffee. Her eyes were puffy. She hadn't slept much. "She's not here, Noah," she said. He looked up at her. "Where did she go?" Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it again. She looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than just one bad night. "She passed away," she said. "We talked about this last night." Noah stared at her. His bottom lip started to tremble. "But I want her to come back." Vanessa crouched down to his level, which seemed to take real effort. Her voice was flat, not mean, just empty, like a house with all the furniture moved out. "I know," she said, "but she can't." Noah started to cry. Not loudly, just soft, steady tears rolling down his cheeks. He clutched Benny against his chest and stood there in the hallway while the crying shook his little shoulders. Vanessa stood back up. She took a long sip of her coffee. She didn't know how to do this. She genuinely did not know what to do with a crying child who needed something she couldn't give. She reached out and patted the top of his head once, twice. "You want some cereal?" she asked. Noah kept crying. "Okay," she said quietly. "Cereal it is." The morning moved slowly. Noah ate 3 bites of his breakfast and then just stared at the bowl. Vanessa sat across from him with her phone out, scrolling through a list of funeral home numbers she had pulled up the night before. She had a notebook open beside her coffee mug. It was already half full of scribbled notes and crossed-out names. She made the first call before 8 in the morning. She stepped into the next room to make it, leaving Noah at the table with his soggy cereal. He sat there quietly. Benny was propped up against the orange juice glass. "She's not coming back," Noah told the bear very seriously. He waited, like he expected Benny to have an answer. Then he nodded slowly, as if the bear had said something kind and helpful. Vanessa came back in, flipping to a new page in her notebook. She barely looked at him. The day went on like that. More phone calls, more paperwork. Noah following Vanessa from room to room like a small, quiet shadow, asking questions she didn't have good answers to, wanting to be held by someone who didn't know how to hold him. By afternoon, she had snapped at him twice for things that weren't really his fault, talking too loud while she was on the phone, spilling a cup of water near some papers on the coffee table. Small things, kid things. But each one landed on her nerves like a stone dropping into still water. That night, after Noah finally fell asleep with Benny tucked under his chin, Vanessa sat at the kitchen table alone. She had her laptop open. A stack of envelopes sat beside it, most of them already torn open. She moved through them one by one. Electric bill, water bill, a credit card statement, medical bills from Sarah's treatment that were staggering in their size. She pressed her fingers against her forehead. The numbers did not add up, not even close. She had her own rent, her own debts, and now this, all of it landing on her at once like a roof caving in. She looked toward the hallway where Noah was sleeping, then back at the bills. Her jaw tightened. The church was full. Noah hadn't expected that. He held Vanessa's hand as they walked through the door, and he looked around at all the people filling the wooden pews. Old people, young people, families with kids, men in work clothes who had clearly come straight from somewhere else and hadn't had time to change. All of them were here for his mama. Noah wore a white button-up shirt that was a little too big for him. Vanessa had bought it 2 days ago at the discount store on Main Street. She'd had to roll the sleeves up 3 times just so his hand showed. He had Benny tucked under his arm. He walked down the center aisle beside Vanessa and slid into the front pew. The church smelled like candles and old wood. Someone had placed flowers at the front, big white ones that Noah didn't know the name of. The pastor began talking. His voice was warm and slow, like someone who had done this many times and understood what the words needed to carry. Sarah Carter was not a loud woman, he said. She didn't seek attention. She didn't want credit. But what she did quietly in this community changed more lives than most of us will ever fully know. Noah looked up at the photograph sitting beside the flowers. It was a big one, printed on white paper, and set inside a simple frame. His mama was smiling in it. She was wearing a yellow sweater he remembered, the soft one she used to let him press his face into when she hugged him. He looked at that yellow sweater for a long time. One by one, people stood up and talked about Sarah. An older woman near the back stood up first. Her voice shook a little, but she kept going. She said that 3 winters ago her heating had gone out, and she hadn't known how she was going to pay to fix it. Then one morning, she found an envelope in her mailbox with exactly enough cash inside and no name on it. She said she had suspected Sarah for years. She said she never got the chance to thank her properly. A younger man stood up next. He had a little girl sitting beside him, who couldn't have been more than 7. He talked about a time when he'd lost his job, and his family had been running out of food. He said bags of groceries had appeared on his porch twice a week for 2 months. No note, no name. Noah listened to every word. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood the feeling behind it. He could hear it in their voices. The way people talked about his mama made his chest feel 2 things at once. A deep ache that made him want to cry, and something warm underneath that, something that felt almost like pride. After the service, people gathered outside. Several of them stopped to speak to Noah directly. They bent down to his level and told him his mama had been a wonderful woman. One older man shook Noah's hand very formally and told him she had been one of the finest people he'd ever known. Noah nodded seriously each time. He held Benny a little tighter. The drive home was quiet. Vanessa kept both hands on the wheel and her eyes on the road. The radio was off. Noah watched the passing houses through the window. When they got inside, Noah went straight to the small table in the living room, where Vanessa had placed one of Sarah's photos in a frame. It was a smaller one. Just there temporarily, sitting beside a lamp. Noah disappeared into his room. He came back 2 minutes later with a folded piece of paper. He opened it carefully on the coffee table. He had drawn it the night before with his crayons. It was a picture of 2 people holding hands. One tall, one small, both of them smiling, a yellow sun up in the corner. He placed it gently against the base of the photo frame. He patted it once to make sure it was straight. Vanessa stood in the kitchen doorway, watching him. The stack of unpaid bills was still sitting on the counter behind her. The morning after the funeral, Noah woke up before the sun came up. He lay still for a moment in the dark, blinking at the ceiling. Then the quiet settled over him. A heavy, wrong kind of quiet. The kind that didn't have his mama's sounds in it. No soft footsteps in the hallway. No smell of coffee drifting under the door. No gentle knock, followed by her voice saying good morning. Sweet boy. Just silence. He pulled Benny close and stared at the ceiling for a long time. When he finally came out of his room, the house was gray and still. He padded into the kitchen in his socks and stood by the table. He wasn't sure what to do. Mama always had something ready in the mornings. Sometimes it was oatmeal with a little honey swirled in. Sometimes it was toast cut into triangles, because she said triangles tasted better than squares, and she'd say it with such a straight face that Noah always believed her. He climbed up into his chair and waited. After a while, Vanessa appeared in the doorway in her bathrobe. Her hair was flat on one side. She looked at Noah sitting there quietly and let out a slow breath through her nose. You could have helped yourself to something, she said. She moved to the cabinet and pulled out a box of cereal and set it on the table a little too hard. She got a bowl from the shelf and put that down too. The spoon clattered when she dropped it beside the bowl. Noah looked at the cereal box. Then he looked at Vanessa. "Mama cut mine up," he said softly. "It's cereal, Noah. There's nothing to cut." He didn't say anything else. He poured the cereal himself, carefully, with both hands around the box. A few pieces scattered across the table. He left them there because he wasn't sure if he should touch them. Vanessa poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter with her back half turned. The morning stretched out like that, long and uncomfortable. Noah spent most of it in the living room. He sat on the floor in front of his mother's photo and talked to it in a low voice. Not full sentences, just little things. He told her about the cereal. He told her it wasn't as good without her. He held Benny in his lap and smoothed the bear's worn ear over and over the way he always did, when something felt too big to hold. Vanessa moved through the house around him. She answered emails. She made phone calls in the back bedroom with the door half closed. Her voice through the wall sounded tired and tight. By afternoon, Noah was restless. He got his crayons out from the basket in his room and settled at the kitchen table. He worked quietly, his tongue pressed to the corner of his mouth the way it always was when he was concentrating. He was drawing the swing set from his old backyard, the one with the yellow slide. He reached across the table for the orange crayon. His elbow caught his cup of water. It went over fast. The water spread across the table in a wide sweep and ran straight off the edge onto a pile of papers Vanessa had left there. Bills, printed emails, something from a lawyer's office. Vanessa was in the room in seconds. She grabbed the papers up with both hands, shaking them out. "Noah!" Her voice came out sharp and loud. "Can you not pay attention for 5 minutes? I have important things here. These aren't toys." Noah froze. His hands dropped to his lap. His chin dropped too. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "You never mean to." She pressed the wet papers against her chest and exhaled hard. "I can't do this. I cannot do this all day, every day." She took the papers to the sink and set them on the edge to dry. She didn't look at Noah again. Noah sat very still at the table. His drawing was wet at one corner. The orange crayon had rolled off and fallen to the floor. He didn't pick it up. That evening, after Noah was in bed, Vanessa sat at the kitchen table alone. The house was quiet. She turned her coffee mug in slow circles on the tabletop, round and round without drinking it. She thought about the bills. She thought about the lawyer's office calling again tomorrow. She thought about how every single morning was going to look like this one. Her eyes drifted to Noah's wet drawing, still sitting on the counter. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked away. Her jaw tightened. Her mind was already moving somewhere else. Somewhere that didn't have a 5-year-old boy in it, or crayon drawings, or cups of spilled water on things that mattered. She was already thinking about how to get out. A week had passed since the funeral. To Noah, it felt like a year. He had been quiet most of those days. He colored. He watched his cartoons. He carried Benny from room to room, like the bear was keeping him anchored to something. Every morning he still woke up, reaching for a sound that wasn't there. But that Thursday evening, something felt different. Vanessa came into the living room while Noah was sitting on the floor with his crayons. She had her jacket on. Her keys were in her hand. "Come on," she said. "We're going out." Noah looked up. "Where?" "Shopping." She said it simply, like it was nothing. But then she added, "I thought we could get out of the house for a bit." Noah set down his crayon. He wasn't sure he had heard her right. Vanessa didn't usually want to take him anywhere. She mostly stayed in her room or talked on her phone in the kitchen. But here she was, standing in the living room with her jacket on, waiting for him. "Can Benny come?" he asked. "Sure, just hurry up." Noah scrambled to his feet and grabbed the bear from the couch. He pushed his shoes on without untying them, the backs crushed down under his heels, and followed her to the door. Outside, the evening was gray and wet. A slow rain was falling, the kind that wasn't quite heavy, but got into everything. It tapped softly against the car roof as Vanessa buckled him into the back seat. Noah pressed his face toward the window and watched the raindrops race each other down the glass. He felt something warm in his chest. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was something quieter than that. It was the feeling of not being alone. Vanessa pulled out of the driveway without saying anything. The windshield wipers swept back and forth in a steady rhythm. The radio was off. The streets were mostly empty, the town already settling in for the night. Noah watched the storefronts pass by. "Are we going to the big grocery store?" he asked. "Mama used to let me pick out the cereal," he said. "She said I had good taste." He paused. "I always picked the one with the bird on the box." Vanessa didn't respond. Noah looked back out the window. He held Benny against his chest and hummed a little to himself. The rain kept falling. The wipers kept sweeping. The car moved through streets that grew quieter and darker the further they went. After a while, Vanessa slowed down. Noah sat up straighter. The grocery store came into view. But the parking lot was nearly empty. The big front windows were dark. A sign on the door was lit faintly from a light inside, but the doors weren't moving. No carts outside. No people. "It's closed," Noah said. Vanessa didn't answer. She pulled the car up close to the curb just outside the entrance and put it in park. She sat there for a moment with both hands on the wheel. Then she turned around. "Okay, buddy," she said. "Out you go." Noah looked at her, then at the dark store, then at the rain. "But it's closed," he said again. "Out, Noah." Something in her voice made his stomach feel strange. He looked at her face. She wasn't looking at him the way someone looks at you when they're about to come right back. She was looking at him the way someone looks at a door they're about to close. "Vanessa!" She got out of the car. She walked around to his side and opened the door. She unclipped his seatbelt with one quick motion and took his hand and helped him down onto the sidewalk. He still had Benny in his arms. His shoes were still crushed down at the back. He stood on the wet sidewalk and looked up at her. She looked at him for just 1 second. Then she got back in the car. The door shut. The engine stayed running. And then the car rolled forward. Noah watched it go. He took 2 steps after it, then 3. His socks were getting wet through the soles of his shoes. "Vanessa!" The red taillights grew smaller and smaller, and then they were gone. Noah stood alone beneath a flickering streetlight. The rain fell around him in a soft, steady curtain. He held Benny tighter. The bear's worn fur was getting damp against his cheek. He stood very still. And he waited. Noah didn't know how long he had been standing there. Long enough for his shoulders to get completely soaked. Long enough for the flickering streetlight above him to buzz and blink twice without going out. Long enough for the cold to work its way through his thin jacket and settle into his skin. He kept watching the end of the street, waiting for the red taillights to come back. They didn't. He looked down at Benny. The bear's soft ears were dark with rainwater now. Noah pulled him tighter anyway. "It's okay," he whispered. He wasn't sure if he was talking to the bear or to himself. He heard the motorcycle before he saw it. A deep, rolling rumble that grew louder as it came around the corner. A single headlight swept across the wet pavement and turned into the parking lot. The engine settled into a low growl and then went quiet. The man who climbed off the bike was big. He wore a heavy leather jacket covered in patches, dark jeans and boots that hit the ground with a solid thud. He had a thick, gray beard and broad shoulders, and the kind of face that had seen a lot of weather over a lot of years. He pulled off his helmet and tucked it under his arm. He was already heading toward the store entrance when he stopped. He had seen Noah. Rex Walker stood very still for a moment. He looked around the parking lot, at the empty spaces, at the dark storefronts, at the rain falling in sheets under the streetlight. His eyes came back to the small boy on the sidewalk. He walked over slowly. He didn't rush. He crouched down a few feet away so he wasn't towering over him. "Hey there, little man," he said. His voice was low and calm. You waiting for somebody? Noah looked at him. He didn't say anything right away. Rex waited. He had learned a long time ago that some things couldn't be rushed. She drove away, Noah finally said. His voice was very small. Rex felt something move in his chest. Who drove away? Vanessa. Noah looked back toward the street. She said we were going shopping, but the store is closed. Rex looked at the dark entrance, then back at Noah, at the soaked jacket, the crushed down shoes. The damp, stuffed bear pressed against the boy's chest. He understood. What's your name, buddy? Noah. I'm Rex. He kept his voice gentle. How old are you, Noah? Noah held up 5 fingers. Rex nodded slowly. He looked around the parking lot one more time. There was nobody. Not a single person. Just the rain and the buzzing streetlight and this tiny boy who had been left here like something forgotten. Rex stood up. He unzipped his leather jacket. You cold? Noah nodded. Rex wrapped the jacket around Noah's shoulders. It was enormous on him. It came down past his knees and swallowed his arms completely. But it was warm. It smelled like motor oil and something earthy, and Noah didn't pull away from it. Come on, Rex said. There's a diner about a block up. They open early for deliveries. He looked down at Noah. You like hot chocolate? Noah gave the tiniest nod. Rex didn't pick him up right away. He just started walking slowly and let Noah fall into step beside him. After about 3 steps, Noah reached up and found Rex's hand without being asked. Rex closed his fingers around the small hand carefully. They walked together through the rain. The diner was warm and lit with soft yellow light. A sleepy-eyed waitress let them in without question. Rex made 2 phone calls, one to the police, one to social services. He spoke quietly at the counter, while Noah sat in a corner booth wrapped in the leather jacket, both hands around a mug of hot chocolate the waitress had brought over without him even asking for it. Rex came back and sat across from him. They didn't talk much. There wasn't a lot to say yet. At some point, Noah's eyes grew heavy. His head dipped. Then slowly, gently, he leaned sideways into the corner of the booth. Benny was tucked under his chin. Rex's jacket covered him like a blanket. And for the first time in a very long while, Noah slept. Rex sat across from him in the quiet diner, watching over him, and did not move. The sun was barely up when Rex pushed through the door of the Iron Brotherhood's clubhouse. The place smelled like coffee and cigarettes. A few guys were already at the long wooden table, hunched over mugs, talking low. Boots scraped against the floor. Someone had the radio on quiet in the back room. Rex walked in, and they looked up. Need you all to listen, he said. That was enough. Rex didn't say things like that unless he meant them. The radio got turned off. A few more guys filtered in from the back hallway. Within 2 minutes, the room was mostly full. Rex told them everything. He told them about the parking lot, about the rain, about the flickering streetlight, and the little boy standing alone beneath it. He told them about the stuffed bear and the thin jacket and how Noah's shoes were soaked straight through. He told them what Noah had said. She drove away. The room got very quiet. Hank, a broad man with a silver ponytail, set his coffee mug down slowly. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the table. Danny, one of the younger guys, shook his head. His jaw was tight. How old? Someone asked. 5, Rex said. Nobody spoke for a moment. Where is he now? Hank asked. Social services put him in a temporary placement last night. Safe house, good people. But that's short term. Rex crossed his arms. They'll move him into the system if nothing changes fast. The word system landed heavy in the room. Every man there knew what that meant. Crowded group homes, shuffled from place to place. A kid learning early that nobody was coming for him. His mom passed away recently, Rex continued. The stepmother walked away and hasn't been found. This boy has got nobody. Hank looked up. You want us to do something about that? It wasn't really a question. "I want you to meet him first," Rex said. They brought Noah over an hour later. He came through the clubhouse door holding Benny against his chest, his eyes wide as he took in all the big men standing around the room. He was clean and dry now, dressed in fresh clothes a social worker had brought. But he still looked small, impossibly small. The bikers looked at each other. Then Hank crouched down to eye level, the same way Rex had done the night before. "Hey, little man, I'm Hank." Noah studied him carefully. Then he held up Benny. "This is Benny," Noah said quietly. Hank nodded seriously, like this was important information. "Benny looks like a tough guy." The corner of Noah's mouth moved, almost a smile. Not quite. One by one, the men introduced themselves. Gruff voices went soft. Tattooed hands gave gentle waves. Nobody crowded him. Nobody rushed him. They just let him stand there in the middle of the room and feel it out. Rex watched from near the door. He saw the exact moment it happened. The moment Noah stopped gripping Benny quite so tightly. By mid-morning, word had spread beyond the clubhouse. Phone calls were made. Texts went out across the county. Brothers from neighboring chapters started showing up. Men who had heard the story and didn't need much more reason than that. By noon, there were 30 bikes parked outside. By 3 in the afternoon, there were 60. A man named Dale, who had spent 20 years in construction before joining the Brotherhood, started drawing rough plans on the back of a paper bag. Another member, Curtis, made a call to his cousin, who owned a plot of land outside of town that had been sitting empty for 2 years. The cousin didn't hesitate. "Use it," he said. Materials were pledged. Tools were promised. Someone contacted a lumber supplier. Someone else reached out to a concrete company. By the time the sun began to sink behind the tree line, 90 Hell's Angels had committed to building Noah a home. Noah was sitting on a workbench near the window, Benny in his lap, watching the long row of motorcycles gleaming in the fading light. His eyes were wide and soft, and full of something that hadn't been there the night before. Hope. The donated land sat on the edge of town, where the road curved gentle, and the trees thinned out into open sky. It was a good piece of ground, flat and wide, with tall grass that caught the morning wind and bent like it was bowing. Rex pulled his truck off the road just after 7. Noah was in the passenger seat with Benny on his lap. He pressed his face against the window as the truck rolled to a stop. Outside, men were everywhere. Trucks lined both sides of the dirt path. Trailers loaded with lumber sat parked near the tree line. A flatbed had already delivered stacks of cinder blocks. Men in work boots moved across the field, talking and pointing, stretching orange marking tape between wooden stakes. Noah watched all of it without blinking. "Okay, buddy," Rex said. "We're here." Noah didn't move right away. He just kept looking out the window. "All those people," he said quietly. "Are they here for me?" Rex looked over at him. The boy's voice wasn't excited. It was careful, like he was afraid to believe the answer. "They are," Rex said. Noah held Benny a little tighter. Then he reached for the door handle. The moment Noah stepped out of the truck, heads turned. The men who had met him at the clubhouse the day before gave easy waves and easy nods. The ones who hadn't met him yet went quiet and watched him with gentle eyes. Nobody made a big fuss. They seemed to understand, without being told, that a little boy who had been through what Noah had been through didn't need noise and commotion. He needed steady. He needed calm. Rex stayed close. Noah followed him like a shadow. They walked the full length of the property together. Rex moved slowly on purpose, pointing things out as they went. He showed Noah where Dale had driven the first row of stakes into the ground, marking the corners of what would become the foundation. He explained how the orange tape stretched between the stakes showed the shape of the rooms. He used his hands to draw walls in the air. Noah listened to every word. At one point, Dale came over with the paper bag he had used for his rough plans the day before. He unfolded it and laid it flat on the hood of a nearby truck. The drawing was simple: a front door, two windows facing the yard, a porch, rooms blocked out in pencil with small labels inside each one. Noah pointed to the smallest room near the back. "What's that one?" "That's a bedroom," Dale said. Noah looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked up at Rex. Rex nodded slowly. Noah went back to studying the drawing. He traced the outline of the bedroom with one small finger, barely touching the paper. They moved back to the center of the property, where the foundation was being marked out. Men worked in pairs, measuring and adjusting, making sure everything was straight. The smell of fresh dirt and cut wood already hung in the cool morning air. A crew member fired up a machine near the edge of the lot, and the low rumble moved through the ground. Noah felt it under his sneakers and looked down at his feet, like the earth itself had spoken to him. More men arrived throughout the morning. Trucks kept pulling up. Someone had brought a big cooler full of water and sandwiches, and left it near the tree line without saying a word about it. By late morning, the foundation lines were fully staked, and the first concrete work was beginning. Shovels broke ground. Men called out measurements. The field that had been empty and quiet just the day before had become something alive and working and full of purpose. Noah stood at the edge of it all, watching. Rex stood beside him with his hands in his pockets. After a while, Noah looked up. "Mr. Rex," he said. His voice was very small against all the noise around them. "Will it really be mine?" The next morning came bright and cool. By 8 o'clock, the dirt path leading to the lot was busy again. But this time it wasn't just bikers. Townspeople showed up. A hardware store owner arrived in a blue pickup loaded with boxes of nails, screws, and sandpaper. He carried them over to the supply area without being asked, and stacked them neatly beside the lumber. A woman from the bakery 2 streets over brought 4 large trays of muffins and set them on a folding table near the cooler. She smiled at the men around her and said nothing else. Just smiled and went back to her car and came back with coffee. A retired schoolteacher named Bill brought extension cords. A young couple from the new neighborhood on the east side brought paint samples and asked if anyone needed help choosing colors for the rooms. 2 teenage boys showed up on bicycles and asked if they could carry things. They were put right to work. Noah watched all of it from beside Rex's truck. He held Benny against his chest and turned his head slowly from one person to the next, like he was trying to count them all, like he was trying to understand what exactly was happening and why so many people kept coming. Rex handed him a muffin. Noah took one small bite and kept watching. By mid-morning, the lot hummed with voices and movement. The foundation work had resumed from the day before, and the sound of shovels and concrete mixers filled the air. Dale moved between workers with his paper bag drawings and a pencil tucked behind his ear. He pointed and measured and occasionally got down on one knee to press a level against the ground. It was almost 10 o'clock when the old green car pulled slowly up the dirt path and stopped near the edge of the lot. The door opened. A woman stepped out. She was tall for her age, with white hair pinned neatly behind her head. She wore a long tan coat and sensible shoes, and she moved with the careful steadiness of someone who had learned to take the world one step at a time. She carried a small paper bag in one hand and looked around the lot with sharp, clear eyes that missed nothing. Margaret Hayes, one of the bikers near the supply table, recognized her from town and gave her a respectful nod. She nodded back, like she knew exactly who he was and had no fear of him at all. She made her way across the lot slowly, but without hesitation. Rex saw her coming and stepped forward. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," she said. She looked up at him without blinking. "I heard what you boys are doing out here. I wanted to see it for myself." She glanced around at the staked foundation, the stacked lumber, the men working. Something in her face settled, like she had been hoping it was real and now knew that it was. She reached into the paper bag and pulled out a small jar of honey. Homemade, The label was handwritten in careful cursive. "For the boy," she said, "if he likes it." Rex took the jar. "That's real kind of you." Margaret was already looking past him. Noah had come around the side of the truck. He stood a few feet away, holding Benny, watching her the way he watched most new people. Quiet, careful, ready to step back if he needed to. Margaret looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked over slowly and crouched down in front of him, steadying herself with one hand on her knee. She was at eye level with him now. Her eyes were warm and dark brown and full of something deep. "Well, hello there," she said softly. Noah looked at her. "Hi." She studied his face. Then her gaze moved to his shoulder, where his shirt had shifted slightly from the morning's activity. There, just below the collar, was a small mark on his skin. Oval-shaped, dark, barely the size of a thumbnail. Margaret went very still. Her breath caught. She looked at the birthmark for a long moment. Then she looked back at Noah's face. Her eyes filled slowly. "I knew your mother," she said quietly. "I knew her very well." The folding table near the cooler had become something of a gathering place. Someone had added 2 more chairs overnight. A power strip ran from a generator to a small coffee maker that one of the bikers had dragged out from somewhere. A box of donuts sat open in the center of the table beside a stack of paper cups. Margaret sat at one end of the table with a mug of coffee, warming both her hands. Noah sat across from her. Rex sat beside Noah with his arms folded on the table, leaning slightly forward. A few other bikers had drifted over without being asked. They stood nearby or pulled up chairs or leaned against the truck. Nobody said much. They just listened. Margaret set her mug down. "Sarah never talked about the things she did," she began. "That was the first thing you needed to know about her. She didn't want anyone to know. She got almost upset if someone tried to thank her." Rex glanced at Noah. The boy was watching Margaret with wide, quiet eyes. "How did you find out?" Rex asked. "Because I paid attention." Margaret smiled gently. "And because she trusted me eventually, after many years." She wrapped her hands around her mug again. She started small. A bag of groceries left on a porch. An envelope slipped under a door. She never signed anything, never left a name. She paused. But I knew her handwriting. I recognized the way she folded things. One of the bikers, standing nearby, shifted his weight. His name was Griff. He was broad and quiet, with a thick gray beard and hands that were permanently stained with grease. He had barely spoken 2 words all morning, but now his brow pulled together slightly, and he looked down at the ground. Margaret continued. "There was a family on Birch Street. Single father, 3 kids. He lost his job one winter, and the gas company was going to shut off his heat." She shook her head slowly. "The bill got paid. Every month for 4 months. Anonymous money order. That man never knew where it came from." Griff made a low sound in his throat. Rex looked at him. Griff rubbed the back of his neck. "Birch Street," he said quietly. "That was me." The table went silent. Griff looked up. His jaw was tight. "Winter of 2014. I had 3 kids and no heat, and I couldn't figure out who kept paying that bill." He stopped talking for a second. "I tried to find out. The gas company couldn't tell me anything. I figured it was a church program or something." He looked at Noah. Noah looked back at him. Griff's voice dropped low. "That was your mom?" Noah didn't fully understand the question, but he nodded anyway because something in Griff's voice told him the right answer was yes. Griff pressed his lips together hard and turned away. He picked up a hammer from the supply table nearby and walked back toward the foundation without another word. But he worked faster after that. Margaret watched him go with a soft expression, like she had expected exactly that. "There was also a woman named Dora on the south end of town," Margaret continued. "Her husband had passed, and she couldn't keep up with the medical bills he left behind. Collection letters were coming every week. She took a slow sip of her coffee. Those letters stopped. The debt got settled. Dora never knew how. A biker named Coop leaned forward from his chair. He was younger than the others, maybe 30. His voice was careful. I grew up in that house. Dora was my grandmother. Margaret looked at him steadily. I know. Coop stared at her. Then he looked at Noah. Something moved across his face. Something heavy and grateful and a little bit broken, all at once. He stood up from his chair. He didn't say anything. He just picked up a length of lumber from the nearby stack, set it on his shoulder, and carried it toward the crew working on the far end of the foundation. His steps were steady and sure, like he was carrying something more than wood. The days settled into a rhythm. Morning came early on the site. Before the sun had fully cleared the tree line, trucks were already pulling in, and tools were already swinging. The sound of hammers and saws filled the cool air from breakfast until the lights started going orange in the late afternoon. Noah was always there. He woke up early because Rex woke up early. He ate whatever Rex ate. He followed Rex around the property the way a small shadow follows its owner, close and quiet, and always just a few steps behind. At first, the bikers weren't sure what to do with him. These were large men with rough hands and loud voices. They were used to building things and fixing things and working through problems without much conversation. A 5-year-old underfoot was something none of them had planned for. But Noah had a way about him. He didn't demand anything. He didn't whine. He just watched everything with those big, steady eyes, and then asked one careful question at a time. He asked Griff why the hammer had a curve on one end. Griff stopped what he was doing and explained it. He asked Coop why the wood had numbers written on it in pencil. Coop crouched down and showed him how measurements worked. He asked a biker named Dutch why he was wearing a tool belt, if he already had a bucket of tools nearby. Dutch laughed so hard he nearly dropped his level. "Kid," he said, "nobody has ever asked me that before in my life." After that, Dutch let Noah wear the tool belt for about 20 minutes. It dragged on the ground on both sides. Noah held it up with both hands and walked very seriously from one end of the work area to the other, inspecting things. The bikers watched him and smiled and said nothing. By the third day, Noah had a job. It wasn't much of a job, but it was his. Whenever someone needed a water bottle from the cooler, Noah brought it. He carried it with both hands and delivered it with great seriousness, like it was something fragile and important. The bikers accepted each one the same way. They thanked him every time, genuinely. He also collected the empty bottles and put them in a recycling bag near the supply table. He kept that area neat without being asked. Rex noticed. He watched Noah move through the worksite each day. Careful, purposeful, always trying to be useful. It was something a 5-year-old should not have needed to be. But Noah had learned early that being useful was a way to belong. And belonging was the thing he wanted most in the world. Rex didn't say anything about it. He just made sure Noah always had something to do. On the 5th evening, someone dragged a pair of folding tables together and covered them with a plastic tablecloth. Food started appearing. One of the bikers had made a big pot of chili. Someone else brought cornbread. A woman from town arrived with a casserole dish, wrapped in foil, and a pie with a lattice crust. They ate together as the last light faded from the sky. Noah sat between Rex and Griff. He had chili on his chin and cornbread crumbs on his shirt. He was listening to Dutch tell a story about the time he accidentally drove his motorcycle into a lake because he was following a GPS that hadn't been updated since 2009. The story got more ridiculous with each detail. Dutch acted out the part where he tried to steer around a dock that wasn't there anymore. And Noah laughed. Not a polite little smile, not a quiet chuckle. A real laugh. Bright and sudden and completely unguarded. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep and catches even the laugher by surprise. Rex heard it. He turned and looked at Noah's face. The boy's eyes were crinkled shut, and his whole small body was shaking with it. Rex felt something shift quietly in his chest. The boy was coming back. The morning after the dinner, Rex did something he hadn't planned on doing. He took Noah home. Not to the construction site, not to the diner, to his actual house. A single-story place on the edge of town with a gravel driveway and a porch that needed painting, and a yard that was mostly weeds, with a few stubborn patches of grass holding on. It wasn't much to look at, but it was quiet, and it was clean, and it had a couch with thick cushions that Noah immediately sank into, like it was trying to swallow him whole. "You live here by yourself?" Noah asked. "Yep," Rex said from the kitchen. Noah looked around the room. There were no toys, no pictures drawn by a child and stuck to the refrigerator, no small shoes by the door, just a bookshelf, a lamp, a coffee table with a ring stain on it, and a television that was older than most of the guys on the work crew. "It's quiet," Noah said. "That bother you?" Noah thought about it. "No," he said. "It feels calm." Rex brought 2 glasses of orange juice to the living room. He set one on the table in front of Noah. Noah picked it up with both hands. Construction was continuing without Rex for the morning. He'd arranged it that way. The crew knew what they were doing, and they didn't need him standing over them every hour. And Noah had woken up tired. Not sick, just the kind of tired that settles into a child after too many hard days in a row. So Rex had made a different call. They spent the morning slow and easy. Rex showed Noah a simple card game with a worn deck that had been sitting in a kitchen drawer for years. Noah didn't fully understand the rules, but he played with complete focus, studying his cards like they contained very important information. He won the 3rd round. Rex was fairly sure it wasn't on purpose, but Noah's face lit up anyway. "Again," Noah said. They played 4 more rounds. After lunch, which was peanut butter sandwiches, and apple slices because that was what Rex had, and Noah said it was his favorite, they sat on the porch together. The air was cool, but not cold. The kind of fall afternoon that feels like a gentle warning before winter arrives. Noah had his bear in his lap. He hadn't let it out of his sight since the night Vanessa left him in the rain. Rex had noticed that. He never said anything about it. Some things didn't need to be pointed out. They sat without talking for a while. A car passed on the road. A bird landed on the porch railing and then left again. "Rex," Noah said. "Yeah. Do you think my mom's house was nice?" Rex looked at him. "I think it probably was," he said. "I think she made everything around her nice." Noah seemed to turn that over in his mind. He rubbed the bear's ear between his fingers, a habit Rex had noticed he did when he was thinking. "I can't remember what it smelled like anymore," Noah said. "The house. I keep trying, but I can't remember." Rex didn't rush to fill the silence with something easy. "That's okay," he said finally. "The important stuff stays. The rest comes back when you're not trying so hard." Noah accepted that. He leaned a little to the side until his small shoulder was resting against Rex's arm. Rex didn't move. That evening, Rex set Noah up on the couch with a pillow and the quilt from the spare room. He turned the lamp down low. Noah had the bear tucked under his arm, and his eyes were getting heavy. Rex stood up to leave. "Rex?" Noah's voice was small and sleepy. "Right here." "Can you stay close?" A pause. "I sleep better when I know you're nearby." Rex looked at the boy's face. The tired eyes. The tight grip on the bear. 5 years old and already so careful about who he trusted. "I'm not going anywhere," Rex said. "Promise." Noah closed his eyes. Rex sat back down. The reporters showed up before the concrete trucks did. There were 2 of them at first. A young woman with a microphone and a cameraman who kept tripping over the uneven ground. They were from the local news station in the next town over. Someone had tipped them off. Nobody knew who. But by the time the morning crew arrived with their tool belts and coffee cups, the camera was already rolling. Rex saw them from across the lot and felt his jaw tighten. He didn't like cameras. Never had. Most of the guys felt the same way. Being a Hell's Angel meant people already had ideas about who you were before you opened your mouth. A camera just made that worse. But then he looked down at Noah, who was standing beside him holding his bear and squinting at the bright light on top of the camera. "What's that for?" Noah asked. "They want to tell people about the house," Rex said. Noah looked up at him. "Is that okay?" Rex thought about it for exactly 1 second. "Yeah," he said. "I think it is." The young reporter's name was Carla. She was maybe 25, nervous in a way she was trying hard to hide, and she walked straight up to Rex like she had rehearsed it. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I'm Carla Diaz from Channel 9. Would you be willing to say a few words about what you all are doing here?" Rex crossed his arms. He was still in his leather jacket with the Iron Brotherhood patch on the back. 3 days of stubble on his face. He looked, by most measures, like someone you didn't approach without a reason. Carla held her ground. Rex respected that. "Few words," he said. "Not a speech." "Understood." They set up near the framing of the house. The skeleton of walls was beginning to take shape behind them, bare wood pale against the gray morning sky. The camera rolled. Rex said what was true. A little boy needed a home. They had the hands to build one. That was the whole story as far as he was concerned. Carla nodded along. Then she asked the question Rex could see coming from the moment she arrived. "Can I speak with Noah?" Rex looked at the boy, who had drifted over toward Big Sal, one of the older club members who had unofficially become Noah's favorite person on the work crew, due to his willingness to let Noah pretend to hammer things. Sal was holding a spare piece of wood steady, while Noah tapped at it with tremendous concentration. "His choice," Rex said. He walked over and crouched down. "Hey, that reporter wants to ask you a couple questions. You don't have to if you don't want to." Noah looked at Carla, then at the camera, then back at Rex. "Will it help the house?" he asked. "Might help people know about it," Rex said. "Sometimes that brings more help." Noah straightened up. He held his bear a little tighter. "Okay," he said. "But you stay where I can see you." "Right here the whole time," Rex said. Noah stood in front of the camera and answered Carla's questions in a voice so soft she had to crouch down to hold the microphone near him. He told her his name. He told her about the house. He held up his bear when she asked if he had a favorite thing. Then she asked him what he was most excited about. Noah was quiet for a moment. He looked at the wooden frame rising behind him. "Having somewhere to stay," he said simply. Carla blinked. Her cameraman lowered the camera slightly, and then remembered himself and raised it back up. That was the clip that aired that evening on Channel 9. By the next morning, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. By afternoon, 3 more news stations had arrived. Donation pages filled with contributions from strangers across the state. People who had never met Noah, never heard of the Iron Brotherhood, never driven through that small town in their lives. They all saw the same thing. A little boy holding a bear, standing in front of a house being built just for him, and they couldn't look away. Vanessa had not thought about Noah in days. That was the truth she would never say out loud. She had been staying at her friend Dana's apartment 2 towns over, sleeping late, eating whatever she wanted, watching television without anyone asking her questions or needing something every 5 minutes. It felt, if she was being honest with herself, like relief. She told herself she had done the right thing, that Noah would be better off, that she was not cut out for motherhood, and pretending otherwise would have only made things worse for everyone. These were the stories she repeated in her head whenever a small, quiet part of her tried to speak up. She kept that part of herself very quiet. On Tuesday evening, she was sitting on Dana's couch with a bowl of chips and the television remote when Dana walked in from the kitchen and said, "Hey, isn't that the town you used to live in?" Vanessa looked up. The news was on. There was a construction site on the screen. A half-built house, surrounded by motorcycles and big men in leather jackets. A reporter was talking about a community coming together in an extraordinary way. Then, the camera cut to a small boy standing in front of the wooden frame. Vanessa sat up slowly. Noah was holding that bear. The one Sarah had given him. His hair was a little longer than she remembered. He looked healthy. He looked calm. He answered the reporter's questions in that soft, careful way he had. The way that used to make Vanessa feel like she wasn't doing anything right. Then the reporter mentioned the donation fund. Vanessa stopped chewing. A fund set up in Noah's name has already raised over $40,000, the reporter said, with more coming in every hour from donors across the state. Dana whistled low. $40,000. Wow. Vanessa did not say anything. She was doing the math. She watched 3 more segments over the next 2 days. Each one was bigger than the last. A second news station, then a third. People were interviewed on the street saying what a wonderful thing the bikers were doing. An older woman named Margaret talked about Noah's mother with tears in her eyes. The Iron Brotherhood was being called heroes. Noah was being called brave. Nobody mentioned Vanessa at all. That bothered her more than she expected. She had spent a week not thinking about Noah. Now she couldn't stop thinking about what was happening around him, around the money, around the house being built on land that someone had donated. A house that would belong to a 5-year-old boy. A 5-year-old boy who was, legally, still her stepson. She pulled up the donation page on her phone. Read through it carefully. Read the comments underneath. People writing things like, "Precious child," and "This little boy deserves the world." She read every word. Then she called a man named Gary Higgins. He was a lawyer she had used once before for something small. He answered on the 3rd ring. "I need to know about custody rights," she said, "for a stepmother." She drove out 2 mornings later. She'd put on a nice blouse, fixed her hair, practiced a few things to say in the rearview mirror on the way over. She pulled into the lot beside the construction site and stepped out of her car slowly, looking around at everything that had been built. It was more than she expected. The house had real walls now. A roof was going up. There were men everywhere, working and talking and moving with purpose. The smell of sawdust hung in the cool air. She spotted Noah before he spotted her. He was sitting on the tailgate of a truck near the tree line, eating a sandwich and saying something to the big man with gray in his beard, who seemed to always be near him. Vanessa straightened her blouse, lifted her chin. She walked toward them with steady steps. "That's my son," she said loudly, and her voice carried across the lot. Every head turned. The hammering stopped. The morning came gray and cold. Rex had barely slept. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched, staring at the phone on the counter like it might ring at any moment with news he wasn't ready to hear. The house was quiet, except for the soft sound of Noah breathing in the next room. Rex had checked on him twice already. Both times, Noah had been curled up on his side, the stuffed bear tucked under his chin, sleeping peacefully the way only small children can. Like the world hadn't shifted beneath his feet the night before. Like Vanessa hadn't appeared out of nowhere and said the words that made Rex's stomach drop straight to the floor. "That's my son." Rex pressed his thumb against the side of his coffee mug, felt the warmth against his skin. He had kept his voice calm yesterday. That had taken everything he had. By 8 in the morning, a woman named Carol Briggs from the County Social Services office was sitting across from Rex at that same kitchen table. She had a clipboard and a kind face and tired eyes that told Rex she had done this kind of work for a long time. "I want you to understand," Carol said, setting her pen down. "We are not making any decisions today. What happened yesterday triggered a review. That's standard procedure." "She abandoned him," Rex said. His voice was steady, quiet. "In the rain, at night. He's 5 years old." "I understand that." Carol nodded. And that matters enormously. But she is still legally his stepmother. Until a court says otherwise, we have to follow the process. Rex looked toward the hallway. Noah was still asleep. What does the process look like? Rex asked. Carol explained it carefully. There would be a custody hearing. Both parties would present their cases. A judge would review everything, including the circumstances of Noah's abandonment, the living situation, and what arrangement would serve Noah's best interests. How long? Rex asked. A few weeks, most likely. A few weeks felt like forever. Around 10 o'clock, Rex's club brother Danny called with news about Vanessa's lawyer. His name is Higgins, Danny said. He's not local. She brought him in from the city. He's already been making calls. Rex rubbed the back of his neck. What kind of calls? Asking questions about the donation fund. Asking who controls it. Danny paused. Rex, she's not doing this because she wants Noah. She's doing this because she wants the money. Rex already knew that. He had known it the moment she showed up in that parking lot with her chin lifted and her eyes moving around the property like she was calculating something. But knowing it and being able to prove it in a courtroom were two very different things. Noah woke up just after 10:30. He padded into the kitchen in his socks, bear tucked under one arm, hair sticking up on one side. He looked at Rex for a moment, then climbed up into the chair across from him. Is she coming back? Noah asked. No big lead-up, no hesitation. Just the question, plain and clear. The way children ask things that adults spend hours trying to work up to. Rex looked at him. I don't know yet, buddy. Noah turned the bear over in his hands slowly. She didn't want me before. Rex felt something tighten in his chest. I know. So why does she want me now? Rex didn't have a good answer for that. Not one he could explain to a 5-year-old. Not one that wouldn't hurt more than it helped. So instead, he leaned forward and rested his arms on the table and looked Noah straight in the eyes. Hey, Rex said quietly. I need you to listen to me. Noah looked up. I'm not going anywhere, Rex said. You hear me? I'm not leaving. Whatever happens next, I will be right here. Noah studied his face for a long moment, searching it, looking for the truth the way kids do, by watching your eyes instead of your words. Then he gave a small nod and looked back down at his bear. Outside, the gray sky hung low over everything, and the uncertainty that had settled over the house the night before hadn't lifted. Not yet. The week moved fast and slow at the same time. During the days, the construction site buzzed with energy. Hammers rang out across the property from sunup to sundown. The smell of fresh lumber and sawdust hung in the cool autumn air. 90 bikers worked alongside local volunteers, contractors, and neighbors who showed up every morning with thermoses of coffee and a willingness to help. The house was nearly done. You could see it now, really see it. A real home with real walls and real windows that caught the morning light. A covered front porch with 2 wooden steps. A backyard with a small swing set that Danny had assembled himself, checking the bolts 3 times to make sure they were tight. Inside, donated furniture had been arranged carefully. A soft couch in the living room, a kitchen table with 4 chairs, and down the hall, a bedroom painted sky blue with a small bed and a bookshelf already lined with picture books. It was Noah's room. Every man who worked on that room had taken his time. Nobody rushed. Nobody cut corners. They measured twice and nailed once and made sure every edge was smooth and every surface was clean. Because it mattered. In the background, the legal dispute kept grinding forward. Rex spent 2 evenings that week sitting across from his attorney, a calm and serious man named Grant, who wore reading glasses and spoke in careful sentences. There were documents to review, statements to prepare, a timeline of events to organize. The night Vanessa left Noah in the rain, The diner, social services, the weeks that followed. Grant was honest with Rex. The case was strong. Vanessa's abandonment was documented. The police report existed. The social services intake record existed. Multiple witnesses existed. But Vanessa's lawyer was pushing hard on one angle: legal standing. Emotional attachment, he argued, did not replace biological or legal ties. And until a judge said otherwise, Vanessa's role as stepmother gave her a claim that couldn't simply be dismissed. Rex hated every word of it. But he sat in that office and listened and answered every question Grant asked him. Careful, patient, doing what needed to be done. Noah didn't know the details of the legal battle. Rex had made sure of that. What Noah knew was that something important was happening, and that grown-ups were working on it. Rex had told him that, simply and clearly, and Noah had accepted it the way he accepted most things. Quietly, with that steady gaze of his that made him seem older than 5. But at night, sometimes, Noah would reach out for Rex's hand before falling asleep. And Rex would stay until the boy's breathing slowed and deepened, and the little fingers finally went loose. The celebration happened on a Saturday. The whole town came out. Cars lined both sides of the road, 3 blocks deep. Folding tables appeared covered in casserole dishes and pie tins and slow cookers steaming in the cool air. Children chased each other across the lawn. American flags snapped in the breeze. Someone had strung lights along the front porch that glowed warm and gold, even in the afternoon. 90 motorcycles were parked in a long, proud row along the street. Noah stood at the edge of the property in his good jacket, the stuffed bear pressed against his chest. He had been told all week that something special was coming. He had heard the hammering and the laughter and the sound of people working hard for him. But he hadn't seen the finished house yet. Rex crouched down beside him. "You ready?" Noah nodded without speaking. Rex took his hand, and they walked forward together through the crowd, which parted gently on both sides. 90 bikers stood watching. Neighbors stood watching. Margaret Hayes stood near the porch with both hands folded at her chest. And when Noah saw the house, really saw it, a sound came out of him that wasn't a word at all. His chin trembled. His eyes filled up fast. And then the tears came. Quiet and honest and full of something too big for a 5-year-old to put into words. The celebration felt like something out of a dream. Long tables stretched across the front yard, loaded with food that neighbors had been cooking since before sunrise. Potato salads and cornbread and slow roasted chicken and 3 different kinds of pie. Someone had set up a speaker near the porch, and soft music drifted across the property, mixing with the sound of laughter and children playing. The whole town had come out. Old men in suspenders stood together near the fence, nodding slowly and smiling. Young mothers pushed strollers along the sidewalk, stopping to admire the house. Kids Noah's age chased each other around the swing set in the backyard, shrieking with the kind of joy that only 5-year-olds can manage without any effort at all. 90 motorcycles still lined the street. Their chrome caught the morning sun and threw small coins of light across the pavement. Noah stood in the middle of all of it and turned in a slow circle, taking everything in. His bear was tucked under one arm. His good jacket was buttoned up to the chin, and his eyes were wide and bright, moving from face to face like he was trying to memorize every single one. Rex stayed close. He had a paper cup of coffee in one hand, and he mostly just watched. Watched Noah drift toward the food table and accept a piece of cornbread from a woman who called him sweetheart. Watched him walk carefully up the 2 porch steps and touch the front door with one small hand, gently, the way you touch something you are afraid might disappear. Danny appeared at Rex's shoulder. The big man crossed his arms and cleared his throat. "Kid's doing all right," Danny said. Rex nodded. "Yeah, you're doing all right too." Danny said it without looking at him. Rex said nothing. He just took a slow sip of coffee and watched Noah push the front door open and step inside the house. Margaret Hayes found Noah in his bedroom. He was standing in the center of the room, still holding his bear, looking at the sky-blue walls and the small bookshelf and the window that faced the backyard where the swing set waited for him. Margaret stood in the doorway. She didn't rush him. After a long moment, Noah turned around. "Did my mama know?" he asked. His voice was small and careful. "About the house?" Margaret walked over slowly and lowered herself onto the edge of the bed. Her knees creaked. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at Noah with warm, steady eyes. "I think," she said gently, "that your mama knew exactly the kind of people were out there in this world. The kind who would take care of you." Noah thought about that. He looked down at his bear. "She gave me him," he said, "before she went away." "I know she did," Margaret said. Noah walked over and sat down beside her on the edge of the bed. He leaned against her arm just slightly, the way a tired child leans against someone they trust. They sat there together for a quiet minute, the two of them, while the celebration carried on outside. By evening, the crowd had thinned. The tables were cleared. The music had gone quiet. A few neighbors lingered near the street, talking in low voices while the sky turned deep orange and then purple above the rooftops. Rex carried Noah inside just after dark. The boy had made it through the whole day on pure determination and joy, but his body had finally given out. His head rested heavy on Rex's shoulder. His bear was still tucked under one arm. Rex laid him down carefully in the sky-blue bedroom and pulled the blanket up to his chin. Noah stirred just slightly and let out a long, slow breath. Within seconds, he was asleep. And there in that quiet room, in the house that 90 men had built for him with their own hands, Noah dreamed. He dreamed about the swing set and the warm lights on the porch and the smell of cornbread and the sound of laughter all around him. He dreamed about home. The courtroom smelled like old wood and floor cleaner. Rex had worn his cleanest clothes, dark jeans, a plain button shirt. He had even left his leather vest at home. He sat in the front row with his hands folded in his lap, shoulders straight, trying to look like someone a judge would trust. Noah sat beside him, still holding the stuffed bear. The boy's feet didn't reach the floor. He kept swinging them slowly back and forth, watching the room fill up with quiet, serious adults. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he could feel that something important was about to take place. Vanessa sat across the aisle with her attorney. She wore a dark blazer and kept her expression carefully calm. She had not looked at Noah once since entering the room. The morning started with questions. The social services worker took the stand first. She spoke plainly about the night Noah was found. She described the condition he was in, soaked through, alone, frightened. She spoke without emotion, reading from her notes in a flat, careful voice. But the facts were hard enough on their own. Rex watched the judge's face as she spoke. The judge was a heavy-set man, in his 60s, with a short gray beard and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He listened without reacting. He wrote things down. He asked a few quiet questions, and then nodded. Then Vanessa's attorney stood up. He was a tall man, with a neat tie and a confident walk. He introduced himself to the court, and then turned toward his table and picked up a manila folder. "Your Honor," he said, "I would like to submit these documents into evidence." The judge accepted the folder from the bailiff and flipped it open. Rex leaned forward slightly. He couldn't read anything from where he sat. He looked over at his own attorney, a quiet woman named Linda, who had agreed to take the case at a deeply reduced rate because she had grown up in this town and remembered what the community had done for her own family once, long ago. Linda's expression did not change, but her pen stopped moving. Vanessa's attorney addressed the court in a smooth, practiced voice. He explained that the documents were records from a family planning file Sarah Carter had completed 2 years before her death. A form asking who she would designate as a trusted contact in matters involving Noah's welfare. Rex's name was not on it. The deceased, the attorney said, appears to have made no legal designation connecting Mr. Walker to this child in any official capacity. In fact, she appears to have never met Mr. Walker at all. The words landed like something heavy dropped onto a hard floor. Rex sat very still. He thought about what Margaret had told them, about the stories, about the anonymous help Sarah had quietly given to so many people, including men in his own club, including him. But none of that was on paper. None of it had names attached to it. That was the whole point of how Sarah operated. She never took credit. She never left a trail. The very thing that made her extraordinary was now working against Noah. Linda leaned over and whispered something to Rex. He nodded slowly, without fully hearing her. Noah had stopped swinging his feet. He sat very still now, his bear pressed against his chest, watching the adults at the front of the room with wide, quiet eyes. The judge set down the folder. He looked out across the courtroom for a long moment. Then he removed his glasses from his forehead and placed them on his nose and reviewed the documents one more time. Finally, he spoke. "Given the questions raised by this new evidence," he said, "and in the interest of ensuring we act in the best interest of the child, this court will delay its final ruling pending further review." He set a date 2 weeks out. Then he closed his folder. Noah turned and looked up at Rex with a small, confused face. "Does that mean we have to wait?" he whispered. Rex put a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Yeah, buddy," he said quietly. "We have to wait." The days after the hearing moved slowly, too slowly. Rex found himself waking up before sunrise, sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before he ever touched it. He would stare at the wall. He would think about the judge's face. He would replay the attorney's words in his head, over and over, like a song he couldn't stop hearing. The documents had shaken something loose inside him. He had never been the kind of man who worried much. 45 years of living rough had taught him to take things as they came. But this was different. This wasn't about him. This was about a 5-year-old boy who had already lost everything once. And the idea of that happening again made Rex feel something he didn't have a clean word for. It sat in his chest like a stone. The news coverage didn't help. After the hearing, the story shifted. The same reporters who had spent weeks celebrating the construction effort and calling the bikers heroes were now asking harder questions. Legal experts appeared on local television talking about the rights of step-parents. Online comment sections filled up fast. Some people stood firmly behind Rex and the club. Others weren't so sure. One evening, Rex was sitting in the front room at the clubhouse when someone turned the TV volume up. A reporter stood outside the courthouse with a microphone. "While the community continues to rally around young Noah Carter," she said, "legal analysts say the case is far from settled." With no formal documentation linking Rex Walker to the boy's care, some are now asking whether the court should consider more traditional placement options. Someone across the room muted the television. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Big Tommy, who was the size of a refrigerator and cried at every single movie he watched, cleared his throat and studied his boots. Darnell, who had been one of the first men to pick up a shovel when construction began, crossed his arms and looked at the floor. Rex stared at the blank screen. "They don't know him," Darnell finally said. "No," Rex agreed. "They don't." But knowing that didn't fix anything. Noah was staying at Margaret's house during the legal process. Social services had approved the arrangement as a temporary measure. Margaret had a warm house and a gentle way about her, and Noah had taken to her quickly. She reminded him, just a little, of the grandmother he had never really known. Rex visited every afternoon. He helped Noah with his jacket. He pushed him on the old wooden swing in Margaret's backyard. He sat with him at the kitchen table while Noah colored pictures, with the box of markers Margaret had bought especially for him. One afternoon, Noah drew a picture of a house, a square building with a triangle roof and a bright yellow door. There were two stick figures standing on the porch. One was short, one was tall. He slid it across the table toward Rex without saying anything. Rex looked at it for a moment. "That us?" he asked. Noah nodded, still coloring. Rex folded the picture carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket. It was a Thursday evening when it happened. Rex had come over after dinner and stayed a little later than usual. He and Margaret sat at the kitchen table talking in low voices, while Noah played in the hallway, just outside the doorway. They hadn't thought much about how close he was. Their voices were quiet. But the house was small, and Noah was very still. And small children hear more than adults expect. Margaret was speaking softly about the documents Vanessa's attorney had submitted, about how the judge might rule, about whether there was anything left that could change the outcome. Rex ran a hand over his jaw and looked down at the table. "I just don't want him to end up somewhere he doesn't know anybody," Rex said. "Not after everything." A small sound came from the hallway. Both of them turned. Noah stood in the doorway in his pajamas, his bear tucked under one arm. His eyes were red. His chin was trembling. "Am I getting abandoned again?" he whispered. Rex barely slept. He had stayed at Margaret's house until well past Noah's bedtime. Long after the boy had finally cried himself quiet. Long after Rex had tucked the blanket up around his small shoulders and sat in the chair beside the bed until his breathing went slow and even. Long after Margaret had pressed a warm mug of tea into his hands and told him softly that they would figure it out. He had driven home in the dark, sat on the edge of his bed, stared at his boots on the floor until the sky outside his window went from black to gray, to the pale gold of early morning. Then he got back in his truck and drove to Margaret's house. She was already awake when he arrived. She opened the door before he even knocked, like she had been watching for his headlights through the front window. She was dressed in her blue cardigan, the one she seemed to wear whenever something important was happening. Her white hair was neatly brushed. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of coffee. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. "Come in," she said quietly. "Noah's still asleep." Rex stepped inside. The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon. The morning light came in, soft through the curtains. He sat down at the kitchen table, and Margaret sat across from him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Margaret set down her mug very carefully. She pressed her lips together. Her brow creased. She had the look of someone reaching for something just at the edge of their memory, stretching toward it like it was a word they had on the tip of their tongue. "I've been thinking," she said. Rex waited. "About something Sarah told me." She paused. "It was maybe 2 years ago. Maybe a little more. We were sitting right here, actually, at this table." She had stopped by with a loaf of bread she had baked, because that was Sarah. She always showed up with something. Rex nodded slowly. Margaret looked down at her hands. She wasn't sick yet. This was before any of that. But she was in a serious kind of mood that day. Thoughtful, like something was weighing on her. Margaret paused again. "She told me she had written a letter." Rex straightened slightly. "A letter," he repeated. "She called it a just-in-case letter. She said she had put down her wishes. Her real wishes. Not just legal things, but personal things. Things she wanted people to know about Noah, about who she trusted." Margaret looked up at Rex. Her eyes were steady. "She said she had put it somewhere safe, somewhere it would last." Rex stared at her. The kitchen was very quiet. "Did she say where?" he asked. Margaret shook her head slowly. "She didn't, and I didn't push her on it. You know how Sarah was. She never made a big thing out of anything she did. She mentioned it, and then she changed the subject and started talking about Noah learning to tie his shoes." A small, sad smile crossed her face. "I didn't think much of it at the time." I should have asked. Rex leaned forward with his elbows on the table. His jaw was tight. That letter could change everything, he said. I know, Margaret said quietly. That's why I've been sitting here since 4 in the morning, trying to remember everything she said. Within the hour, Rex had made 3 phone calls. By mid-morning, a small group had gathered at Margaret's kitchen table. Darnell was there, a woman named Carol, who had volunteered throughout the construction and had known Sarah through the local church. Margaret herself, and Pastor Jim from the small chapel on the edge of town, where Sarah had attended services for years. They spread out what they had. A box of documents Carol had collected from Sarah's apartment after the funeral. A small stack of papers the church had kept on file. A bag of personal items that had been set aside and nearly forgotten. The search began. The search had gone on all day. And it had turned up nothing. Carol had gone through every paper in the document box twice. She had unfolded old birthday cards. She had read through handwritten notes and grocery lists and a small journal with only 3 pages filled. Nothing that looked like the letter Sarah had described. Pastor Jim had checked the church filing cabinet, baptism records, donation receipts, volunteer rosters going back 12 years. He had gone through every folder and every envelope. He had come back to Margaret's table with nothing but dust on his hands and an apologetic look on his face. Rex had driven back to Sarah's old apartment building and spoken to the landlord. The man had cleared the unit weeks ago. Anything left behind had gone to a donation center or the trash. Rex had stood in the empty hallway outside the door and stared at the floor for a long moment before walking back to his truck. He had sat in the parking lot with both hands on the steering wheel and breathed. Then he drove back. By early evening, the kitchen table was covered in papers. Empty coffee cups sat at every corner. The overhead light hummed softly. Outside the window, the sky had gone purple and orange, and then a deep, tired blue. Noah was in the living room with Darnell, who had quietly taken over the job of keeping the boy occupied. Rex could hear the low murmur of Darnell's voice, and the occasional small sound of Noah asking a question. It helped, knowing the boy was close. Margaret sat very still at the head of the table. Her hands were folded in front of her. She had that faraway look again, the searching one. Pastor Jim refilled his coffee and sat back down. "What about the safe deposit boxes?" he said. Everyone looked at him. "The church has 3 of them at the savings bank on Birch Street," he said. "We use them for storing legal documents, deed copies, that kind of thing." He paused. "But a few years back, Sarah asked if she could store something there, something personal. I told her yes." The table went very quiet. Rex looked at him. "You're just remembering this now." Pastor Jim pressed his hand flat on the table. "I'm sorry. I truly am. There are 2 boxes we use regularly. The 3rd one I haven't opened in years. I forgot it existed." He shook his head slowly. "She asked so quietly. She said it was just some paperwork she wanted kept safe. I didn't ask questions." That was Sarah. "You didn't question her when she asked for something small." Rex was already standing. The bank on Birch Street was closed. But the branch manager, a soft-spoken woman named Helen, lived 4 blocks away. Margaret knew her personally. 1 phone call later, Helen was pulling on her coat. 20 minutes after that, Rex and Pastor Jim and Margaret stood inside the quiet bank. The overhead lights cast a pale glow across the marble floor. Helen led them to the back room without a word. She understood without being told that this was important. The 3rd box was in the bottom row. Small, dusty along the top edge. It had not been touched in a very long time. Pastor Jim signed the release form. Helen unlocked it. Rex held his breath. Pastor Jim reached inside. There was only 1 item in the box. A plain white envelope, sealed carefully along the back. The paper had yellowed just slightly at the edges. On the front, written in a neat, careful hand, were 3 words. "For Noah's future." And below that, in the same careful handwriting, a signature. Sarah Carter. Margaret brought both hands up to her mouth. Pastor Jim stood very still. Rex stared at the envelope for a long moment. His chest felt tight. His throat felt tighter. He reached out and took it gently from Pastor Jim's hands, holding it the way you hold something fragile, something that matters more than you have words for. He looked at Margaret. Her eyes were full of tears. "That's her writing," she whispered. "That's her." The morning arrived cold and gray. Rex had not slept. He had sat in the chair beside Noah's temporary bed at Margaret's house for most of the night, listening to the boy breathe, watching the slow rise and fall of his small chest. The stuffed bear was tucked under Noah's arm the way it always was, his fingers curled around one worn ear. Rex had watched him sleep and tried to hold himself together. At some point before dawn, he had walked to the kitchen and stood at the window with a cup of coffee he never drank. The backyard was dark. The trees were still. He had thought about all the things that could go wrong inside that courtroom. He had thought about all the things he should have done differently, all the ways a man like him might not measure up to what a judge expected. He had thought about Noah's voice from 2 nights ago. "Am I getting abandoned again?" Rex pressed his jaw tight and set the coffee cup down. He was not going to let that happen, but fear and intention were 2 different things, and he knew it. The courthouse steps were wet from the overnight rain. Rex climbed them in his cleanest dark jacket, the one without patches on the sleeves. Margaret walked beside him, moving slowly but steadily with her cane. Pastor Jim walked on her other side. 3 of the bikers had come too, sitting in the back row when they filed inside. They wore plain clothes. They sat with their hands folded and their eyes forward, and said nothing. Noah was being kept at Margaret's house while the hearing took place. Rex had not wanted to bring him. Not for this part. Not until he knew how it was going to go. He missed the boy already. The courtroom was smaller than Rex expected. Pale wood paneling, fluorescent lights overhead, a flag in the corner. Judge Patricia Hendro sat behind the bench with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She was a compact woman with silver hair and a very steady expression. Nothing on her face told you anything about what she was thinking. Vanessa was already seated at the table across the aisle. Her attorney, a sharp-looking man in a dark suit, had a stack of folders arranged in front of him like a small fortress. Vanessa sat with her arms crossed and her chin lifted. She did not look at Rex when he came in. Rex's attorney was a woman named Claire Dawson, who had taken the case for barely anything. She had 2 kids of her own and had heard about Noah on the news. She had called Rex and told him flatly that she wanted to help. Rex had said yes before she finished the sentence. Claire had the envelope. It sat inside a clear protective sleeve in her briefcase. The court had authenticated it the evening before. The signature had been verified. The contents had been sealed and reviewed privately by the judge first thing that morning. Rex had not read it himself. He had held it all evening after finding it. He had turned it over in his hands and thought about Sarah, a woman he barely knew, a woman whose face he could only half remember, but whose quiet kindness had reached into his life during a time when he was drowning and pulled him back toward solid ground, without ever asking to be thanked for it. He had held the letter and then carefully handed it to Claire. He wanted the judge to hear it first. The session opened. Arguments resumed. Vanessa's attorney spoke for a long time about legal rights and proper procedure and emotional bias clouding community judgment. He used a lot of large words and said very little that was warm. Rex sat still through all of it. Then Claire rose from her seat. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm and clear, "we would like to submit a newly discovered document into evidence." She held up the sealed letter in its protective sleeve. This letter was written by Sarah Carter before her death and stored under legal safekeeping. It speaks directly to her wishes for her son's future. The courtroom went completely silent. The judge set down her pen. Vanessa's attorney was on his feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor. The authenticity of this document has not been fully established in open court. Judge Hendro held up one hand without looking at him. The document was authenticated yesterday evening through 2 independent handwriting analysts, she said. I reviewed their findings this morning. The objection is overruled. She looked at Claire. You may proceed. Claire walked the letter to the clerk, who passed it carefully up to the judge. Judge Hendro held it for a moment. She looked it over once, quietly, the way someone does when they are reading something for the second time, and still finding it heavy. Then she passed it back to the clerk and nodded. The letter will be read aloud for the record, she said. The clerk, a young man with a careful voice, unfolded the pages. He cleared his throat softly. The room held its breath. He began to read. To whoever finds themselves holding this letter. My name is Sarah Carter. I am writing this because I love my son more than I have words for, and I want to be sure he is safe, even in the moments when I cannot be there to keep him safe myself. Noah is the best thing I have ever done. He is gentle and curious, and he trusts people with his whole heart. That is a beautiful thing. It is also the reason I worry. Because a boy who trusts that completely needs someone around him who will never break that trust. I have thought carefully about who that person might be. There is a man I want to tell you about. His name is Rex Walker. The clerk paused for only a fraction of a second. Then he continued. I know how that name sounds to some people. I know what they see when they look at him. A big man on a loud motorcycle, patches on his jacket, rough hands, a face that does not smile easily. But I have seen something else. 3 winters ago, Rex Walker was in a very dark place. He had lost almost everything that mattered to him, and he did not ask a single person for help. He was too proud for that, too used to handling things alone. I found out quietly, the way I usually find things out, and I made sure certain bills got paid and certain doors stayed open. I never told him it was me. I did not need him to know. What I watched in the months after that was a man who found his footing again, not because someone rescued him, but because someone simply made sure he had solid ground to stand on long enough to rescue himself. And he did. He stood back up. He looked after the people around him. He became, as I always believed he would, someone you could count on completely. That is the kind of person I want near my son. I am not saying Rex Walker is perfect. I am not saying his life looks the way most people think a guardian's life should look. What I am saying is that I have watched this man for years, quietly, the way I watch most people. And what I have seen in him is courage and loyalty and a gentleness he works very hard to keep hidden. Noah needs someone who will stay, someone who will not leave when things get difficult, someone who will sit with him in the dark if that is what he needs. Rex Walker is that person. I believe it with everything I have. If something happens to me, and you are reading this letter, please do right by my boy. Give Rex the chance to be what I already know he is. With love, always. Sarah Carter. The clerk folded the pages carefully and set them down. Nobody spoke. Rex stared at the table in front of him. His jaw was tight. His eyes were burning, and he was working very hard not to let that show. Margaret, sitting just behind him in the gallery, pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. Vanessa was very still. Judge Hendro removed her glasses and set them beside her notepad. She looked at the room for a long moment. I have heard enough testimony for today, she said. Court will resume tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I will deliver my ruling at that time. She struck her gavel once. The session was closed. The morning came in gray and quiet. Rex arrived at the courthouse early. He sat in his truck for a few minutes before going inside, just staring at the building. The stone steps, the old wooden doors, the flag above the entrance moving gently in the cold morning air. He got out and walked up the steps alone. Noah was already inside with Claire, their attorney, waiting on a bench in the hallway. He was wearing a clean blue shirt that someone from the club had picked up for him at the store. His hair was neatly combed. He looked very small sitting there, and very serious. The way children look when they understand something important is happening even if they cannot explain exactly what it is. He was holding the bear. He had not let go of it once since yesterday. When he saw Rex come through the door, his whole face changed. He slid off the bench and ran down the hallway, and Rex crouched down and caught him easily, scooping him up off the ground. "You came," Noah said. "Course I came," Rex said. "Told you I would." Noah pressed his face against Rex's shoulder and held on. Rex held him back, one big hand spread wide across the boy's back, and did not rush him. They stayed like that for a long moment, while the hallway filled slowly with footsteps and quiet voices around them. The courtroom was full when they entered. Every seat was taken. The bikers filled 2 full rows on the left side, all of them cleaned up as best they could manage. Clean boots, tucked shirts, hats removed. They sat with their hands folded and their shoulders square. 90 men who had spent the last several weeks pouring everything they had into a promise. Margaret sat near the front, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes soft and steady. Vanessa sat at the opposite table with her attorney. She did not look at Noah when he walked in. Rex settled Noah into the chair beside him. Noah set the bear carefully on the table, sitting it upright so it faced forward. Then he reached over and took Rex's hand. Rex looked down at those small fingers wrapped around his and swallowed hard. Judge Hendro entered at exactly 9 o'clock. Everyone rose, then sat again. The room was so quiet that the sound of the judge settling her papers was perfectly clear from every corner. She put on her glasses and looked at the room. "I have reviewed all evidence presented in this case," she said. "I have reviewed the testimony of social services representatives, the character testimonies submitted on behalf of Mr. Walker, the documentation provided by the petitioner, and the authenticated letter written by the late Sarah Carter." She paused. "The law requires me to act in the best interest of the child. That is not a formality. That is the entire purpose of these proceedings." She looked toward Vanessa's side of the room. "The evidence regarding the events of the night in question is overwhelming and consistent. The child was abandoned. That fact is not in dispute, regardless of how it has been characterized in these proceedings." Vanessa's attorney shifted in his chair. He said nothing. Judge Hendro looked down at her notes, then back up. "It is the ruling of this court that permanent guardianship of Noah James Carter be granted to Rex Daniel Walker, effective immediately." The words landed like something physical. For 1 full second, nothing moved. Then, the back rows erupted. Not in shouting, but in something rougher and more honest than that. Grown men pressing their fists to their mouths, hands gripping shoulders. Someone in the back row put his face in his hands and shook. Margaret made a small sound and covered her eyes. Noah looked up at Rex. Rex was already looking at him. "Does that mean I stay with you?" Noah asked. Rex could not speak right away. He nodded. Noah threw himself off the chair and into Rex's arms so fast that the bear tumbled off the table. Rex caught him, stood straight up with the boy held tight against his chest. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Rex Walker cried without trying to stop himself. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.